Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, December 20th, 2019. An unnecessary solution for a problem they created. If you're like 99.999% of people who spend their lives trying to do productive things, the idea of spending countless hours trying to create a very complex solution to a problem that you created is so preposterous that it's hard to understand. Now, you'd think that the tax community had just received an early Christmas present from the way they are all gushing about the just-released Treasury regulations regarding the treatment of global intangible low-taxed income, or GILTI, G-I-L-T-I. These are not final yet, but they're close to what the final regulations will be. Now, these regulations are needed because, like most tax laws, this portion of the law is very vague in general. And without these regulations, tax professionals would not be able to charge huge amounts of money to give advice that might be correct. According to Gordon Gray, writing for the American Action Forum, GILTI is a new provision of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. GILTI is defined as income in excess of what policymakers determine to be a normal rate of return, 10%, on tangible assets. Taxpayers reporting GILTI face effective tax rates of at least 10.5% through 2025 and 13.125% thereafter on GILTI income. Now, while the definition of GILTI may capture high-return intangible income, it really captures any income, irrespective of its source, in excess of the deemed rate of return. Now, just what problem was this complicated provision intended to address? Well, some corporations have been lawfully avoiding the U.S. income tax by keeping money offshore and not paying U.S. tax on it. Now, this was perfectly legal under the old tax code, but now certain income will be taxed in the U.S. at a minimum rate. The ability to defer all U.S. income taxes has ended. This change is intended to make it less profitable for U.S. companies to keep income-earning assets overseas and to encourage them to bring them back to the U.S. If you start trying to read the proposed regulations for GILTI, you'll quickly see that only the most astute tax advisors can comprehend them. You'll also see that many hours will be spent, and there will still be issues that will have to be litigated. The few people who really seem to understand these rules will be sought out and paid immense amounts of money. Now, all of these very bright people will not be devoting their energies to improving the well-being of the people of the world, but instead will be draining huge amounts of time and resources trying to solve a problem that shouldn't be there in the first place. The fair tax eliminates any reasons for U.S. companies, or any companies from any country for that matter, to keep money outside of the United States. In fact, what sane multinational corporation will want to base its operations in a jurisdiction that charges even a 10% tax on their earnings when they could come to the U.S. and pay no tax because with the fair tax there would be no corporate income tax? The savings on taxes and compliance costs could then be devoted to making better products at lower prices, something that a competitive economy requires. Now, just think of the outrage in the other capitals around the world when there is a mass exodus of companies based in those countries to the U.S. But also think of the way that these other countries will have to rethink their own tax systems in order to compete. Would not the entire world benefit from a sane tax system? In conclusion, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the D.C. ruling class and their minions sincerely believe that they have superior understanding and knowledge. They live in a bubble in which only people like them are allowed. They sit in that bubble and look out at the rest of us shaking their heads in pity. The only people they listen to are people like them who continuously reinforce the idea that they and they alone should decide what's good and what's bad. If they see that people object to the way the income tax unfairly rewards companies like Apple that keep large amounts of money offshore and are finally forced to address the problem, they simply make it worse. Like most of the things they do to shore up a corrupt and broken income tax system, their solutions only make matters worse. It's like saying the operation was a success, but the patient died. They are just not interested in our health and well-being. They believe that it's enough to not really fix the problem, but to just make a lot of noise and then say with pride that they addressed the problem. The word addressed is used in most of their statements because even they can't say with a straight face that the problem is fixed. Now, isn't it time that we demand that our elected representatives actually fix the problem? Trying is just not good enough, particularly when the solution is so simple: the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.